Rowan, do you remember where all of our DVDs ended up?
Oh, down in the cabinet behind Trent.
Behind Trent? Oh, Trent's in the way, is that what you're saying?
What are you looking for?
Well, I wanted to see if I had...
Hands are surprisingly steady right now. What do you know?
Are you sure? Oh, yes, it's very nice, sir. Well,
Of either natural or Excalibur.
What?
You guys are crazy.
Excalibur or the natural. And he's not recovering. In others, he's wounded, and the wound doesn't heal. And so he's confined, and because now the royal dynasty is not intact, because the king at the top is debilitated, the whole kingdom is now falling into ruin. The kingdom is becoming debilitated. And so the idea of the Grail quest is that the knights go out to seek the Grail, which is the antidote that will cure not only the king, but the Wasteland. And, it involves, in some of the stories, it's King Arthur. In the other, the king is not named, but he's simply called the Fisher King. In another story, he's called Bron. In another story, he's called Anfortas. Anfortas? I don't know if I got the accent right, but it's something like that. So there's variance in the story. But one of the major overall themes is this idea of this quest out across the wasteland in order to find this agency, whatever it is, that's symbolized by the Grail that will restore the wasteland and the king. Now, it goes back, it has Celtic, it has ancient roots, pre-Christian roots, but it was, like so many things, it was taken and cast into a Christian framework. And in that story, the Grail was the cup from which Jesus and the disciples drank at the Last Supper, right? And they have this ritual. They pass the cup around. They all drink from this cup. And I won't get into all. I've talked to Beckett about some of this, the alternate hidden version, right, of this tale. The conspiracy angle of it. But it's likely that the story, that the place that the Last Supper was held was in the house of Joseph of Arimathea, who was a rich member, I think, of the Sanhedrin. He was one of the richest men in Jerusalem, but he's described in the New Testament as being a secret disciple of Jesus, which is one of the first hints that there's something else going on behind the scenes, right? But anyways, they have this whole ceremony, and then the next day, Jesus is brought out, he's scourged, and then he's crucified on the cross, right? Now, crucifixion is designed to prolong the agony as much as possible. Usually 3 to 4 to 5 days for the victim to actually expire, right? And they will typically feed the victim vinegar and stuff because that kind of revives them. It's a stimulant. And I forget what it's called, there's a piece that goes on the bottom that you've got the cross, and then at the bottom you've got this piece of wood that the victims can actually stand on, right? Well, once it gets to the point where they're going to have the Passover, or the what do you call the Jewish holy day?
Passover. No.
Saturday. What do they?
Oh, the Sabbath.
The Sabbath, yeah. So the next day is the Sabbath, and so their rules require anybody who being crucified has to be removed from the cross. So what they do is they go up there with a big hammer and they smash and break the legs of the person that's hanging there because now they can't support themselves. So when they can't support themselves, they suffocate after a period of time, right? So Jesus had been on the cross 6 hours. Joseph of Arimathea goes to Pontius Pilate and basically says, he's dead. Can I have the body? Pilate doesn't believe he's dead. He sends out this centurion with a lance. The centurion comes up and pierces Christ in the side, right? Gets no response, comes back and tells Pilate, yeah, he's dead, right? Pilate releases the body to Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph goes, and as he's taking the body, probably with some Confederates, they're taking the body off the cross. He takes the cup that they were drinking at, and the side is still bleeding. It's still wounded. He collects the blood into that chalice and then seals it up, right? Now, there's a whole series of legends that, like, what happened after that. One of the legends says that he was, thrown into prison for a while, and then he miraculously escaped. He went with Mary Magdalene, and they sailed west from Jerusalem there, sailed across the Mediterranean, and landed in what is now Marseille, France. She disembarked there. According to the legend, she was pregnant with Jesus' child, which is another interesting twist on the whole story, because, that adds a whole other dimension to it, right? Then Joseph of Arimathea proceeds on to the British Isles with 12 disciples. Think Marseille. What is that? It translates, it has something to do with Mary. It takes its name, the town, Marseille, France, from Mary. I forget the exact translation, like, I don't know, Mary was here or something. But so goes to Britain. He presents himself to a pagan chieftain named Arviragus. And Arviragus has sort of been apparently waiting for him to get there. And so he gives Joseph of Arimathea and his 12 followers 120 hides of land. Now, hide is an ancient British unit of land measure. It's part of the imperial system, which is the same system that gives us miles, feet, inches, yards, furlongs, right? A hide is 120 acres, right? So he was given 12 hides of land. 12, that means that he was given 1,440 acres of land. And this was going to be the sacred precinct. At the center of that, he builds a small circular church, roughly 40 feet in diameter, a chapel. And that endured for centuries, and there was a whole succession of monks now that lived at this place, which eventually became Glastonbury. And they kept up and they restored that original circular chapel, because apparently the dimensions and size of that chapel were significant for some reason, right? So then eventually, the little circular chapel, which was initially made out of wood, they encased that in lead, and then I think they built it. It went through several successive iterations, and then in I think the 1000s, they finally removed it, and they built a rectangular chapel dedicated to Mary. We don't really know which Mary, Mary Magdalene or Virgin Mary, but it's dedicated. It's been since then been called Mary's Chapel. The width of that chapel is the same as the diameter of the original circular chapel, right? So now Glastonbury, England, has become associated with being legendarily one of the resting places of the Grail. Now, what was the Grail? Well, it's generally symbolized as this cup or chalice, right? But it's much more than that. Way more than we could talk about here tonight. But ultimately, I think what it's talking about is a type of a technology. And there's many reasons for that. And I've got a whole presentation of hundreds of slides here where I go through the various, what they call the Grail romances. There's like 24 of them. Most of them are written in French. Some of them are written in German. Some of them are written in English, medieval English. At least 3 of them. It's almost certain that the authors of them were Knights Templar. You ever heard of the Templar Knights? Okay, so, which brings in another interesting dimension to this whole story, right? So they, between about 1175 and 1225, a period of about 50 years, there was like 24 of these stories released to public consumption. It was like almost like a major disclosure event, right? If you start going through these different, Wolfram von Eschenbach was one of the primary authors. Chrétien de Troyes was another one. Thomas Mallory, he was later. There was a number of them that were, Parlevaux was anonymous. But if you go through them, they all have a slightly different slant. I just mentioned the variants on the king's name. In Mallory's story, it's King Arthur. I think it's in Wolfram's story or Creighton's story where it's the Fisher King, because I believe in that story it was Percival, who has been long questing for years and across the wasteland, right? And he comes upon this man, an old man in a boat fishing in the river, and he says he's heard that the Grail is being kept in a castle called Corbenic. So he says, I'm lost, I'm looking for the castle Corbenic. And the old fisherman tells him how to get there, right? So he journeys more and he gets to the castle Corbenic and he goes in there. And it's this sumptuous, everything just gilded and lush, and there's all kinds of people in there dining and wearing, regal clothes and everything. And he comes in there and he's seated down on this bench. And while he's seated there, this whole procession comes through the room of these people, young people, carrying objects, right? Now, when he set out, now, this is about Percival, which actually is a sort of what would you call it? It's not a metaphor. What is the term? Percival actually gives us the term pierce the veil.
Yeah.
Right?
Anagram?
Is it an anagram? I think an anagram, isn't that when you have the first letters? I don't know, it doesn't matter. But anyway, so Percival is the one who's on this quest, right? Now, Percival, his father was a knight, a famous knight who was killed in battle. And his mother, Queen Herzeloid, was so grief-stricken that she retired to the forests, and she did not want Percival, her son, to know about her father because she was afraid that he would follow in his footsteps, right? So he's raised like a wild thing out in the middle of the forest, right? So he gets to know all the animals and all of these things. He can talk to the animals. It's it's like a whole subplot to the story. But one day he's out there in the woods and he sees these knights coming through, like in a clearing there, and they're very regal and majestic as they come through on their big steeds, and it triggers something in him, and so he needs to find out where they're going. He has some kind of interaction. Where are you going? Well, they're going to Camelot, right? So he goes back to his mother, and his mother had this prophetic dream that he was going to leave, right? The dream itself is filled with really wild imagery, but anyways, he goes and he tells her that he's leaving, and she tries to dissuade him from going, but she can't stop him. He leaves, and then she dies of a broken heart. So he goes and he becomes part of Camelot. He rises up. He becomes like a great knight. And then when the kingdom falls into ruin and the king becomes sick, all the knights disperse to go out to find the antidote. And he's the one in this particular story who finds it. But he's there in that big hall in this castle, and he's presented with this display. Almost all of these young people come through bearing these various symbolic objects, right? And then he looks into the other room, and one of them is carrying this plate of this nourishing food, and in the other room, confined to a couch, is the king. And then he sees that that's the Fisher King, the same gentleman that he saw fishing in the boat on the river. And now he's in there and he's being fed this food that a young woman has brought into him. And so he's being fed all of this stuff. And he's thinking about when he began his training as a knight. He apprenticed to this elderly knight who, was very accomplished in all the knightly skills. And one of the things he admonished him is says, it's better if you don't speak too much. You want to listen more than you speak. He told me you don't speak superficially as a knight. You don't just gossip. You basically keep a meditative, contemplative type of bearing, and you listen more than you speak. And so he's sitting there, and this whole pageantry is passing in front of him. And what he doesn't realize is that they've set this up for him, and he is expected to ask, what does it all mean? So they present this whole phenomena for him, this whole pageantry, like some kind of a play or something, with all of this symbolical stuff and these people doing this stuff, and he keeps thinking about the elderly knight and his telling him not to, not to speak out of turn or whatever. So he doesn't, this whole thing has been set up for his enlightenment. But how it has to happen is he has to ask, what does it mean? And then it will be interpreted for him. And he never asked that. So then they go to bed, he goes to sleep, and he wakes up in the morning, and he comes down out. And he's in this barren castle. It looks like it had been occupied for 1,000 years. It's spider webs and dirt. There's nobody there. It's completely abandoned. And so he realizes that this must have been some kind of a magical presentation or something. And he goes out. Now he's totally crestfallen because he thought he was going to be able to recover the Grail. He thought it was in reach. And so he goes out and he's just beside himself. And then he sees this old hag come running out of the woods, screeching at him, mad at him, and tries to, I think, beat him over the head with a stick and said, you failed us because you didn't ask the question when you should have asked it. The whole thing was set up to arouse your interest, your curiosity, and you were supposed to ask. And if you had asked, the spell would have been broken just by you asking the right question at the right time. And you didn't do it. You failed us. Turns out that this old hag was actually this beautiful young woman. And had he asked the question and restored, she would have been restored to her youthful beauty. So there's all of this stuff going on in there that's... Anyways, so... when you go back to Camelot, right now, the best knight of all was Lancelot. He'd never been defeated in battle. His skills were like an order of magnitude above anybody else's. And any time he participated in a battle, they won, hands down, right? However, King Arthur's wife, Guinevere, seduces him out in the woods. And he succumbs to her seductions, and they have an affair in the woods, and King Arthur discovers them, finds out that they're having this affair, and in his panic, he jumps up and falls down, and his own sword pierces him in the side. Coincidentally, the very same place where Jesus was pierced with the Lancelot. Highly symbolic.
Lancelot was pierced, or King Arthur was pierced?
Lancelot was pierced, right? So he disappears. He goes into self-banishment, and that's it. He's gone. So once he's gone, then the whole knighthood begins to deteriorate. See, and as they deteriorate, so does the land. So does the king, right? So finally, Percival recovers the Grail after long hardships, and 5 years later, he recovers the Grail. He returns to Camelot. The king drinks of it and is restored, and immediately they get up and they ride out because the king's bastard son, Mordred, in this vacuum that's been created, he is like instrumental in, like he's the force of darkness that is helping to bring on this ruin, right? So they go out to have this apocalyptic battle with Mordred. So Arthur and Mordred go at it, and they end up killing each other, right? Well, after all these years, Lancelot shows up. Now they're losing, right? The knights are losing, and then Lancelot shows up, and they realize he's there, and suddenly their morale just goes off the charts, and they fight back, and they beat the minions of Mordred. But as he's laying there dying on the battlefield, Arthur goes up to him and, says all is forgiven, this is whatever. And then he realizes that Lancelot is wounded and is probably dying. And then he looks, and Lancelot says, no, it's the old wound. It's never healed. And that's what's now, he's succumbing to this. He's carried this old wound for all these years, and now he's been in this apocalyptic battle, and he's dying, and it's the old wound that's killing him. So Then Arthur goes and has the one-on-one battle with Mordred. They both pretty much kill each other at the same time, but Arthur's not quite dead. He gives Excalibur to Percival, and he tells Percival, go and throw this back into the lake, because he got it from the Lady of the Lake in the first place, right? So it's a magical sword. And when Arthur first met Lancelot, they were challenged, and they had this battle. Now, see, Lancelot has never lost, and he knows he's never lost, and he knows he's going to kill King Arthur. But he doesn't understand that King Arthur has Excalibur, which is a magical sword with magical powers. So with that sword, he's able to almost defeat Lancelot. And then at that point, Lancelot realizes, I found my better. It's almost like the retelling of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. When Gilgamesh has this, he's the best there ever, nobody can defeat Gilgamesh. But then he meets Enkidu, the wild man of the forest. So there's some of these thematic kind of overtones. Enkidu is just like Percival was raised as the wild man of the forest and could talk to the animals. Enkidu in the Epic of Gilgamesh was raised in the forest and could talk to the animals, see? So once you've entered this mythic realm, you begin to see all of these very interesting interconnections there. Well, the upshot of it is that there's many variants on the story, like I said. But here's where it gets interesting. The great apocalyptic battle is called the Battle of Camlann, or Camlann, right, where Arthur fought Mordred. And what happens is that if you look it up online, you can pull it up right now. Look up the Battle of Camlann, Camlann.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll usually should give a date for that.
537 AD.
537 AD. What's interesting about that?
The Dark Ages.
The Dark Age, yes. So what we know now is that during that time of the quest was one of the worst climatic episodes of the last 2,000 years. And in fact, they talk about that forest growth over the northern hemisphere almost came to a stop for nearly 10 years, starting at 536 AD, went to 544, 545 AD. So the Arthurian story is set right into this time period that we now know. Literally, like England was literally a wasteland during this period of time. So the tales have roots in real events, which to me adds this whole other dimension of interest and reality to those tales, right? Okay, so what is all this as background? Well, the natural. The natural is a retelling of the Arthurian myth, using baseball as the context. So you have this guy, what? Baseball. Yep, baseball. So you've got this guy. What?
James Earl Jones saying baseball.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
I know the parody of it. Where's that from originally?
Well, it's from
Field
of Dreams.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Near the end, when he's talking about baseball and
there's a parody of that, but it's a football movie. Division 3.
Oh.
And it goes, football. We play it.
And it said it's only James Earl Jones could say it.
Yeah.
So, Malamud, the author who wrote this, he was very much into mythology and occultism. The Natural.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I didn't know
the movie was taken.
Right.
Yeah. And so he used baseball as kind of the framework, the metaphorical framework for a retelling of the Arthurian story in the quest for the Grail. So it revolves around this. The natural is guy played by Robert Redford. He's introduced at the beginning of the movie as a kid, and he's got these extraordinary powers of, athleticism and so he is like the Lancelot character, see? And he grows up and he sets out to become, and he says, like he'll say, like to his girlfriend when he's leaving her, he says, I'll come back, but I'm going to go out, and when I come back, I'll be the best that's ever been, right? So he leaves, but then something happens. Something happens, and he's sidelined for 15 years. So then when you next see him, he's walking, he's much older, and he's walking up. He's heard that there's this team that's like the bottom of the league, and he goes up there and presents himself to the manager of the team, and they say, like, get out of here. You're at the age where people are, retiring, not starting their career. Who are you? We've never heard of you, But see,
Don't tell me the whole plot, Randall.
What?
Don't tell me the whole plot.
No, I'm going to tell you one more thing,
Okay, all right.
so you'll see the connection. So as he's going up there, you see that the team that he's going to join, they're called the New York Knights. Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, I'm ready to watch.
All right, we don't want those overheads on. They'll wash out the screen.
See if you can hear this.
So this has what's his name? Randy Newman did the soundtrack for this, and it was really a good, uplifting, inspiring soundtrack. And kind of an epic. Half the appeal for me of this movie is the Randy Newman score. Gotta have that. Oh yeah. Jeez, if we don't have that.
Should be in here, Randall.
What?
You know what you need in here that would fully complete this room is a couch back here, one of those big sectionals.
Yeah, we thought about that. When Julie and I watch movies, I usually am right here and she's right there.
Yeah.
So she gets up there the full.
Okay.
Okay.
Just bear with me for a
Okay,
second.
Beckett. God.
I'll
Beckett
figure it
always
out
like
someday.
this? Is Beckett always this annoying? When
Only
he's-
on the weekends, usually.
Okay.
Homer lived ages ago and wrote about heroes and gods. And he would have had it in mind to write about baseball had he seen you out there today.
You know what, someday, I'm gonna break every record in the book. You know I got it, Izzy.
And what will you hope to accomplish?
When I walk down the street, people look at me and say, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best there ever was.
He lost
You thought
his
something happened to me
powers.
last night.
See? Remember?
Did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm even impressing myself.